How's that? Okay, getting thumbs ups. So we're live streaming this meeting. We're also recording this meeting, so it will be available for you to watch again if you want to, if I'm that entertaining, or if you just missed something, want to go re-review it. We will have it uploaded on our YouTube page. We also have the slides from this meeting uploaded to our website. I will show you later how to access those. I do have a number of staff with me here. The plan tonight, I'm going to go through this presentation, present the adjudication process to you, and then my staff, I will take some questions with the group, and then my staff and I will remain if people have additional questions and want to talk about specific water rights or things like that. We'll stick around and answer questions as long as it takes or until they kick us out, whichever one comes first. So, like I said, we'll have a question session at the end, so please hold your questions there. Plus, they've got this real bright light on me. It's hard to see you, and I do apologize if there's a glare. But as I talked about, we're going to talk through the adjudication process, but first, the first question that most people have is, why did I receive a summons? We'll talk through that. We'll talk about what water rights are, talk about a little bit of history of the adjudication, and then we'll talk through the adjudication process, start to finish, let you know what our timeline is, and then, like I said, we'll take some questions. So the first question, like I said, is why did I receive a summons? So especially for folks who may not own a water right, they say, I don't own a water right, why did you send me this? So summons is sent to all known water right owners on the state engineer's records, as well as all of the property owners within an area. And that's required by law for us to do that. That's part of this process. So, and the language is outlined in law as well. So I apologize if that letter was a little unnerving or anything like that, but it's just part of our effort to make sure that everybody's aware of what we're doing. We're as transparent as we can be and try to get everybody involved in this process. So what is a general adjudication? If you really boil it down, it's an action in a state district court. It's kind of a special type of court case, and state law establishes that the judicial branch has the authority to determine water rights, but it also incorporates an important role that the state engineer plays in that process. With the general adjudication, as I mentioned with the summons, it joins and binds all water users in an area with the state engineer. Our entire process is outlined in the Utah Code, and that is Title 73, Chapter 4. So this whole process, you know, we follow it as directed in the law. We have some extra steps because we try to, you know, make it a little bit easier for folks. But really, an adjudication is just trying to bring all the water rights on the record and bring clarity to those water rights. As you see here on this map, every area in the state of Utah either is under an active adjudication court order or has been. You see there in the middle, the purple, I don't know if you can see my laser pointer, but that's Utah Lake Jordan River. The Benjamin area is a subdivision within the Utah Lake Jordan River general adjudication. So we also need to talk about why we do these adjudications. And to explain that, I want to give you a little bit of history. So we're trying to bring all the claims onto the permanent record, onto the records of the state engineer. And a little bit of history there. So settlement in the Salt Lake Valley, the pioneers first came here in around 1847, and then Utah didn't become a state until 1896. And of course, when you settle an area, what's the first thing you do? You find ways to divert and use water. You develop those sources, right? So there was about 50 years of development, at least in the Salt Lake area, where people were coming in and starting to use water before we even became a state. And then to add on top of that, the first statutes governing water in Utah didn't come about until 1903. When the Constitution was written, there was only one sentence in the Constitution that had to do with water rights. And it was Article 17, and it said, all existing rights to the use of any of the waters in this state for any useful or beneficial purpose are hereby recognized and confirmed. You'll notice that it doesn't say anything about quantified. It just says recognized and confirmed. So essentially what they did is they said, okay, we're a state now. If you have a water right, if you're using water, that is grandfathered in, but we're going to start developing some laws that govern water rights in the state. And so that point there on the screen that says pre-statutory claims, as I said, the first water laws came on the books in 1903, but it only had to do with surface water rights. And what they said is if you have water use prior to 1903, you're grandfathered in, but after 1903 for surface sources, you have to file an application with the state engineer. Okay, so we have what we call diligence claims, which we refer to as a pre-statutory claim for surface water rights. Okay, water rights from a surface source. And then in 1935, the law was expanded to include water rights from underground sources. So we have that underground water claims. That's when those come in. And so if someone had a water right, drilled a well or something, developed an underground source prior to 1935, that is a pre-statutory water right from a groundwater source. Okay, and so those rights that were grandfathered in were not required to be brought on the books, but that's how the adjudication process was created. It was saying, okay, we need to bring these water uses, these water rights onto the books, so let's create this adjudication program and go out and take claims from people and get these on the books. So that's the first part of it. We also have Federal Reserve rights, through the adjudication. We will evaluate Federal Reserve rights, which think about, Indian reservations or national forests, things like that. The Winters Doctrine in 1908 essentially said that when the federal government sets aside a reservation, it implicitly sets aside sufficient water to meet the demands of those uses of that land. And then the McCarran Amendment allows the federal government to waive their sovereign immunity and partake in state-based adjudications. So that's not totally relevant for everybody here, but that is something we do. And as I've said, one of the main goals is increase clarity of the water rights picture. We go out and sometimes they say an adjudication is a court-ordered update of all the records of all of the state engineers' records. The next point is the point that scares a lot of people, but we do make a recommendation to a court to remove or reduce water rights which have been wholly or partially forfeited through non-use. And we understand that's the scary one, but in Utah law, it does say that if a water right or a portion of a water right has not been put to beneficial use for a period of 7 years, it may be subject to forfeiture. And so, we'll go out and evaluate these claims, or if a water right hasn't been used for a long time, we may recommend to the court that water right be disallowed, be removed from the record. And then at the end of this adjudication process, we will obtain final comprehensive decrees on all the water rights within the respective drainage. Okay, so moving on, it's important to understand what is a water right. So a water right is a right to divert and beneficially use water. And, we have several attributes that help define these water rights. Has a defined nature of beneficial use. So, irrigation, stock watering, whatever. The priority date is when a water right was first put to beneficial use. And in Utah, we operate under the doctrine of prior appropriation, which is first in time, first in right. With a finite resource that's so important, whoever uses the water first in time should have first access to that water. And it's also important to understand that Utah law declares that water is property of the public. Okay, so it's owned by the public, and folks can get a right to use that water. Other components of a water right are, like I said, the quantity of water that can be either in a flow rate of cubic feet per second or a volume. We typically use acre feet. And then a point of diversion where that water is removed from the source. That could be a well, a spring, a head gate on a river or a ditch, and then the place of use. One common point of confusion: a water right is not a share in an irrigation company. Okay, so if you have shares in an irrigation company in this area, that's separate. It's also not water provided by a municipality. So talking more about that, some local examples: Strawberry Water Users Association, Strawberry Highline Canal Company, Spanish Fork Westfield Irrigation Company, Lakeshore Irrigation Company. If you own a share in one of these companies, we will be adjudicating the underlying rights, the rights owned by that company. And as a shareholder, you typically don't need to file a water user's claim. A couple points to talk about there. If you are an irrigation company, it may be worth it to let your shareholders know, hey, we're on it, we're filing claims, so they don't stress out over that. And shareholders can encourage their irrigation companies, hey, make sure you're filing a claim. And this list is not exhaustive. There may be other irrigation companies in the area. So talking more about the Benjamin Subdivision, as I said, it's part of the Utah Lake Jordan River Adjudication, and state law allows the state engineer to divide and subdivide general adjudication areas to make it more manageable as we work through these. So if a water right has a point of diversion within this boundary, then it will be included in this adjudication effort. Okay, it will be evaluated in the adjudication. Some statistics up there on the top right of the screen. We have 852 water rights on our records for this area and 806 landowners. Most of the rights in this area are private wells, from what we can tell. But that's the subdivision. So like I said, if the point of diversion is within this area, it will be included in this adjudication. If the place of use is in this area, but it's diverted from somewhere outside of this area, typically those are not included. So now let's talk about the actual process. So we'll talk through kind of a general overview on this, and then I'll dive into each of these phases a little bit more. But the first phase is the summons and the notice to file claims. So we've already sent out the notice, we've sent out the summons, that's why you're all here. We are at that step 4, the public meeting, and then in a few weeks here, we'll be sending out a notice to file claims. Then that'll push us into phase 2, where we look at all the claims we've received against our records, we generate a list of unclaimed rights. There's an objection period for that. We'll be out again for another public meeting to talk you through, here's what we've done so far, here's what to expect, and answer any questions at that point. We'll do a final summons to search all the records again, make sure we didn't miss anybody, and then we will work through objections to that list of unclaimed rights. And once those are all resolved, we'll seek a decree with the court. The third phase is the longest phase. That's where we investigate these claims, put them all together into what's called a proposed determination that we file with the court. Then there's another objection period. We'll be out here again for another public meeting to give you a status update and let you know what to expect moving forward. And then that last step, similar to phase 2, we'll work through objections and seek a decree for this subdivision. Talking more about phase 1, so The petition stage is not typically relevant today. Like I told you, every area in Utah is either under an active adjudication order or has been at some time. For the Utah Lake Jordan River general adjudication, that stemmed from a court case. Most of these, well, all of these adjudications either started because the state engineer petitioned the court saying, hey, we're having a hard time administering these rights. We want to conduct an adjudication so we can clarify the record. The other way to initiate an adjudication is to have a bunch of water users petition the court. And that's actually what happened in this case. The Utah Lake Jordan River general adjudication stems from court case Salt Lake City versus Tamara Anderson and others. The court received several petitions from Spanish Fork Westfield Irrigation Company and others. They all petitioned the Third District Court. And it actually initially was denied, went up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court told the District Court, you're going to do an adjudication. And so, excuse me, then in 1944, the District Court judge ordered an adjudication of all the rights in Utah and Salt Lake counties and directed the state engineer to go evaluate those. Later, in 1972, there was an amended order from the court that expanded that effort from just Utah and Salt Lake counties to include Utah, Salt Lake, Davis, Summit, Wasatch, Sanpete, and Juab counties. So that's a little bit of history of the petition part and what happened there. And then the notice of commencement, we sent out March 19th and March 26th in the newspaper. A lot of you probably saw that. Then that summons, we've already talked about that a little bit. We mailed that out, and we also published it in the newspaper for 5 weeks. And again, we're here at the public meeting. We want to be transparent about this process. We want to help you through it. And that's why we have multiple public meetings and talking through the process, and we're here to answer questions. So then we're planning for May 22nd, we will be sending out the notice to file claims. And what that will look like, we'll send a cover letter kind of explaining explaining that this is your notice to file claims. Excuse me. And then included in that, we will include one of these water users claims. So when we say claim filing, that is filing one of these water user claims with our office or with the court. If you are an owner of a water right on our records, when we send this out, you will see a filled out water users claim, as you see in the foreground on the slide there. It will have the water rights attributes as they are on our records. If you're a property owner, you will see the water user claim that's in the background there. It'll have a bunch of blanks on it. You can fill it in and send it to us if you want to claim a water right. We understand that this is a complicated process, so we do want to help with these. So when you get these claims, if you're trying to fill it out, trying to make sense of it, please contact us. We really do want to help fill these out. We know it's complicated. Then when we receive all those claims, we will file those with the district court. And it's important to know too that claims are only required on perfected rights. We only adjudicate perfected water rights. And what that means is certificated rights. So if you filed an application to appropriate, meaning that this is not a pre-statutory claim, and then you file proof on that, get a certificate from us, that will be included in the adjudication. We also adjudicate decreed rights. And then, as I've talked about, those diligence claims, underground water claims, the pre-statutory claims that were grandfathered in. And again, irrigation company shareholders are not usually required to file a claim. It says normally required. They're not required to file a claim. Sometimes we include perfected share statements in the proposed determination for informational purposes only. If you have questions about that, let us know. So after we send out that notice to file claims with these water user claims, that will take us into phase 2. So there will be 90 days, a 90-day period to file those claims from the day those are mailed out. And then once we receive those claims, we compare all of those versus what we have on our records. And if there are any water rights on our records that did not receive a claim, they will be compiled into this list of unclaimed rights. Once we compile that list of unclaimed rights, we will file that with the court, and we will serve that on all of the known claimants. So all of the owners of water rights on our records will serve that list of unclaimed rights with. And that triggers that 90-day objection period. So if we have a list of unclaimed rights on there, or sorry, if we have a water right on the list of unclaimed rights that somebody maybe forgot to claim or whatever else happened, they can object to that with the court and try to get that removed. Like I said, we'll have a public meeting to talk through that in a little bit more detail when the time comes. And then we'll send that final summons, as I've said, and then work through those objections and seek a decree on the list of unclaimed rights. And I want to reiterate at this point, it's very, very important. If you have a water right, make sure you file your claim. When that list of unclaimed rights is decreed, so if we have rights on our records that did not receive a claim, and we publish that with the court, and then it's later decreed, those water rights are considered abandoned, and they have no legal standing at that point. Okay? So please file your claims. Please call us if you have questions. We'll help you fill those out and navigate that. So phase 3, again, we investigate all these claims. And what that means is we will look at our records. We'll do a file review of these rights and say, okay, here's the point of diversion, here's the beneficial uses, here's the nature of use, things like that. And then we will go out in the field and do a field investigation of these rights to confirm what's on the file. We'd love to work with you on that field investigation. And then what we end up doing is prepare a document that looks very similar to the water user claim. It's called a state engineer's recommendation. And this is one of those parts that's not required by law, but we do it as a courtesy. We will mail out that state engineer's recommendation saying, hey, based on what we've seen so far, this is going to be our recommendation to the court. With that SER, that state engineer's recommendation, we will include a memo that we typed up that basically explains we investigated this right on this day, this is what we found, this is who we talked to, and explain why we made that recommendation. And at that point, talk to us. You know, if we got something wrong, we're happy to amend the SER if we are missing information or got something wrong. So that SER is kind of us reaching out to you saying, hey, this is our plan, let us know if we're missing something, and we can and frequently do amend those initial SERs. Once we evaluate all of the water rights in an area and we produce those recommendations for every water right in the area, we compile them all together into a book called the proposed determination, file that with the court. And again, similar to the list of unclaimed rights, there's a 90-day objection period. And on the front end, on the early end of that objection period, we'll come out and have another public meeting. We'll walk you through everything we've done so far, and we'll walk you through how to file an objection if you think we got something wrong. And then, again, we'll work through objections and petition the court to render a decree at that point. The claim evaluation sometimes takes several years. Objection resolution sometimes can take multiple years. So this is sometimes a lengthy process, but here's our anticipated timeline. So as I said, May 22nd, we'll be sending out that notice to file claims. That's when the 90-day claim filing period begins. Okay, and we'll talk about it in a couple slides, there is a way to request an extension from the state engineer for an additional 30 days to file that claim. We'll talk you through how to do that. So then September 19th is when that 90 days plus that 30-day extension period comes to a close, we'll start investigating claims at that point. And then the plan is by February 2026, we will have compiled that list of unclaimed rights, conducted our public meeting, and then that 90-day objection period will start. And we're hoping that by December 2027 that we'll have evaluated all of these and compiled that proposed determination. Then hopefully, depending on what objections we receive and how quickly we're able to work through those, we're hoping to get a decree, an interlocutory decree by 2028. Okay, so now we'll talk through some common issues, some common questions that we get. First, why isn't my name on the water right? So the Division of Water Rights, the State Engineer's Office, is not the official office of record for title on water rights. It may sound counterintuitive, but it's the county recorder that is. Sometimes people forget to update title with our office. The two important things, or I guess three important things to know here. First, even if your name is not on our records as the owner, you can still file a claim on that. Okay, so if you have a water right and it's in your father's name or something like that, you can still file a claim on that. But you need to understand that the water user's claim does not update title. Okay, you need to contact our office and submit what's called a report of water right conveyance. If you're in that situation, we're happy to answer questions, help you through that process. And then there's sometimes lapsed applications. So if somebody files an application to appropriate with us and doesn't complete the project in the allotted time, or doesn't file an extension or a proof of beneficial use, that application can lapse. And this is, the adjudication is kind of the last chance to reinstate that lapsed application and have it included. And if you're in that situation, those are pretty rare, but if you're in that situation, we can help you navigate that. But you need to submit a water user's claim and an affidavit of beneficial use. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. Like I said, we're happy to help and talk you through that if you're in that situation. So again, the 30-day extension. The really important thing to know here, it needs to be requested during the original 90-day period to file claims. You can request that by emailing me, or you can request it in writing. Usually, for a lot of people, email is easier. If you don't file that extension within that original 90-day claim filing period, you need to go through the court and have the court issue an extension. So my last slide here, before we break into questions, is the one that most people ask about. Will I lose my water right? So water users who are using their water, we want people to use their water. So if you're using your water in accordance with the records on the file, just file your claim. We'll come out and evaluate it, and there's not much to worry about there. If it hasn't been used, if a water right has not been used for a period of 7 years, the water right or the unused portion of that water right may be recommended to be disallowed in the proposed determination. And individuals using water without a water right of record, you need to submit a claim. These are these grandfathered water rights that we're talking about, these pre-statutory claims. And if you have one of those claims, you need to file that claim, or you may forever be barred from asserting that claim in the future. Okay. So on that note, we'll take some questions. Before I start taking any questions, I'll just remind you, my staff will stick around afterward if you have particular questions about your specific water right or something like that. So I ask you to try to keep it to general questions about the process, or about just about the adjudication. Once I take a few questions, I'll go through a website tour for those interested. You don't need to stick around for that if you don't want to, but we will walk you through how to use our mapping server, how to find your water right, things like that. So on that note, do we have any questions? Okay.
You're using your well water right to water livestock, cattle, or horses. That's now prohibited, or does that not qualify, or is your water only to be used for irrigation?
Okay. So I'm gonna try to repeat all these questions because we do have people watching online and they can't hear you. So the question was, if someone has a well that they have a water right out of a well, can that water right be used only for irrigation or for other uses as well? And the answer is it can be used for a number of different reasons. You know, someone can have a water right out of a well that has domestic use for their home, stock watering, irrigation, and there's a whole laundry list of beneficial uses that somebody can have. And you can have one water right that has multiple beneficial uses. Some people have multiple water rights, one for irrigation, one for domestic, one for stock watering, things like that. That's less rare, but to answer your question, yes, you can use, or you can have multiple beneficial uses for a single water right. Okay, other questions? And yeah, sorry, this light's right in my eyes. If I don't see a, okay, yes, sir. Okay, thanks for that question. That's one of the most common that we get. The question is, if there is an unclaimed water right or a water right that is forfeited due to non-use, who acquires that water right or what happens with that? And other versions of this question that we get is the state going to auction these water rights? No, that's not going to happen. So as I said, in Utah, water is owned by the public. It's a finite resource that should be available to people who need it, you know, but it's finite, so we need to come up with a distribution system. In this area, this area is fully appropriated, which means that there is more demand on the water. Sometimes we call that paper water. There's more water rights than there is physical water in this system. So when we remove unused rights or unclaimed rights, whatever water uses are happening on the ground are still going to happen. We're just taking those off the record. And so we're not, like the state of Utah is not going to take those in auction, and we're just removing them from the record. And that water that used to be used under that water right is available to fulfill other water rights in the area. In the area or the same system. And you can say that this system is Southern Utah County, or you can say the system is Utah Lake Jordan River. It's all one drainage. So does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Yes, sir. Okay, yeah, great question. Are there fees? Does Division of Water Rights charge a fee for people to file claims? No. So there is no fee to file a water user's claim, which I actually just learned last week that, well, maybe I shouldn't say that. I think that Idaho does have fees for claims. But we do not here in the state of Utah. We do not, there's no fee for somebody to file a water user's claim. Okay. Other questions? Okay, so the question is, who determines the value of a right? So are you asking the monetary value or like the quantification? The monetary value. So yeah, so the question is, who assigns a monetary value to the right? I guess the market. The way I can answer that is the state engineer's office, the Division of Water Rights, is not in the business of buying or selling water rights. So I have nothing to do with that. And our office generally.
Basically, whatever someone paid to acquire.
Essentially, yes, it's what people will pay. Something to kind of add on to that. So typically the price of the cost of a water right, if you were to purchase one, is based on the beneficial use, the quantity of water. And we do have standard duty values that we use to quantify water rights. And that is something we will do in the adjudication, is we will look at the beneficial use, apply the standard duty value, and quantify that water right. So the question is, what about demand? And yes, that's so not through the adjudication, but the state engineer, that's a big part of the reason we do this process, is we have these studies and we have an understanding of what the safe yield in an area is, or how much water is in an area. And we have to administer the water rights and distribute the water based on that supply. And so it does play into it that way. And we do have, not in the adjudication again, but it is, the state engineer is tasked with distributing water rights. Okay?
Lack of water means other things for that. Like, in other words, you guys can say, hey, we cannot allocate that much water because you can't meter it. You're not metering it right now. Are you going to meter it?
Okay, so the question is, are we going to meter sources, I'll say. And we are trying to get much more sophisticated. We've made leaps and bounds. We've improved a lot on our water measurement. And in some cases, like with municipalities, we require them to report their water usage. So that plays into our administration, yes. So other questions about adjudication issues? Yes, sir.
So, I guess it'd be called proof your well, or would I have to hire my own person to come prove my well?
Okay, good question again. So the question is, will the state come out? Will our employees come out and proof the well? In other words, do a field investigation and make a recommendation? Yes, our staff will do that. Some people prefer to hire a professional to submit their claims and things like that. But our staff will come out and do a field investigation, and there's no cost. Like, we're not going to come out and say, okay, we just evaluated your water right, here's a bill. That's not how it works. Okay, so the question is, do we come out and say you do not need this much water? So that is something we evaluate, and not in the, I would phrase it differently, like we will come out and say, okay, your water right is good for 20 acres, but you have, you're irrigating 18 acres. And so has that other 2 acres been used in the past 7 years? And that's something we will evaluate. You say it's kind of a bias approach. So, I mean, what I'll say to that is that's the task that we've been given by the legislature. So, any other questions? Yes, sir. Okay, good question. So the question is, if someone has a water right for 50 livestock and they have 50 livestock, then they sell off 25 livestock, how will we look at that? So we understand that adjudication, our evaluation, is a snapshot in time. And so that's where that 7 years comes in. We would look at that and say, well, have you had 50 in the last 7 years? Yes. Okay. And we'll move on. And I will add that there are protections from forfeiture in statute, and there's what's called a non-use application. If somebody knows that a portion of their water right will not be used for a period of time, they can file a non-use application with our office. And for the purposes of this meeting, this group, if somebody has questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them afterward. Okay, so the question is, if somebody has a water right for 50 livestock units, we go out and they have 75 on the property, are we going to tell them they have to get rid of 25? What we typically do is we'll just put a comment on the recommendation saying that we observe 75 livestock in the field and the claimant, needs to pursue additional water rights or something like that. I don't know the exact wording. But if people are in that case, I'm happy to talk about specific cases afterward. I saw a light flashing up there. Sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so the question is, how complicated does this process make buying new water rights? So I would argue that it makes it easier because the water rights have been evaluated, and once a water right is evaluated through an adjudication and decreed by a court, then it's in great standing. So I think I would argue that it helps that. Okay, so the question is if somebody buys a water right or wants to buy a water right while we are in this process, does it complicate things? I would say for the most part, no, because if somebody buys a water right while we're working on this, we're really just looking at beneficial use. We don't, like I said, the water user claims don't update title. So we're going out and looking at beneficial use. So if the right is being used, then we'll make our recommendation based on that. And then you purchase that and maybe file a change application on it or something like that. Does that answer your question? Yeah, and we understand that, and that's why I say we understand it's a snapshot in time, and we do before we before we send our proposed determination to the court, we do a final review and check for any changes to the water rights, and so we try to capture that as best we can. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so the question is, if it seemed like there were kind of two questions in there. One of them I think I touched on earlier. The second one was if somebody wants to build a house, how do they obtain a water right? And despite the adjudication, this is the process beforehand, before we commence this adjudication. In this area, if somebody wanted to build a house and have a water right for that, they would need to purchase that water right and file a change application on it, or acquire that water from. Well, that's okay. If I don't move, that there's been no change in this area when it comes to that. You either need to purchase a water right and file a change application on it, or be provided water from a municipality, something like that. Okay. Yeah.
Like somebody purchased the water right with property to build a home in the future. They haven't built the home in 7 years. I mean, they lose the water right, have to buy a new water right for that same house.
Okay, so the question is, if somebody purchases a property that has a water right and they haven't built their home yet, and maybe it's been 7 years and they haven't built the home, what happens with that water right? And typically in that case, this is part of why we only adjudicate perfected water rights, because if it is a perfected water right, it has a beneficial use that should already be in existence. And so just continue to use that water. And what I mean is, you wouldn't have a domestic. I don't see a situation where you purchase land and you're like, I want to build this house here. There's not a house here, but I have a water right for a domestic use and haven't filed a change application on it. Like I said, there are some protections from forfeiture in statute. One of those is if the water right is under an approved change application, we understand that that's in kind of a transitory state. It's being moved or used for something else, and so there's protections there. But the basic answer there is if a water right has not been put to beneficial use for a period of 7 years, we'll look at that, and we'll also consider if there are protections for forfeiture on that. So if you have a specific question about that or a specific case, we can talk about it, or I'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
The developers, those that have the most money in their pockets, to do something with that without losing. If a single individual that needs to pay to put the well in and put the home in this economy, they may be subject to losing what they already paid for.
So the gentleman mentioned, like, it may be a private water user who doesn't have an endless supply of money, and so they've been waiting to develop that project. And so what I'll say is, in most cases that I've seen, if it's a situation like that, somebody purchased the land and they purchased a different water right and filed a change application to move it to that land. If they bought the land with a water right, those uses are still there. And again, there are what we call non-use applications that they could file on that to protect from forfeiture as well. Okay.
How often this adjudication process comes around? I mean, as time goes on, people die, the property moves on into the kids, or they sell it to other people.
Right.
Get the record straight so everybody's protected underwater. So how often does this thing come around?
Yeah, great question. The question is, how often is an area adjudicated? We adjudicate once, we publish a proposed determination, and that's it. Because like I said, to tie it back to what I was talking about earlier, why we conduct adjudications. Adjudications were created as a mechanism to bring pre-statutory water use onto the record. So we're going to adjudicate once, we publish a water right once in a proposed determination, and we move on. Okay? Move on. Yeah, move on indefinitely, unless they change the laws and say re-adjudicate. But as of right now, yes, we publish once, we adjudicate an area once, and that's it. Yeah, so the question is part of this process to, I guess, keep tabs on growth in an area, and that's definitely not the intent. That's not what the adjudication was created for, other than the fact that, we're trying to bring more clarity to the record so we understand the supply and the demand better. Okay? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. So the question is, these field visits, are you going to be made aware, or are we going to be sneaky? We typically try to make contact with folks before we come out, but sometimes if we can't get a hold of somebody, we can go out and do a field investigation. We want to work with you. We want you to be there, but sometimes we do go out and investigate things if we can't get a hold of somebody. So the investigation entails we go out and verify the point of diversion, the beneficial uses, the place of use, the extent of use, how much of each beneficial use is occurring, and things like that. So like I said, we'll do a field review ahead of time and say, here's the attributes of this water right as approved and as perfected, and then we'll go out and verify that. And if we find something that's off, like the point of diversion is off a little bit, sometimes we can correct that. Sometimes we just put a note on there that the point of diversion is inaccurate, something like that. Hey, yeah, in the back. Okay, so the question is, if a well is intermittent, doesn't always produce water, how do we view that? So that's one of the potential protections from forfeiture. And I don't know it verbatim, but something along the lines of if a source does not provide sufficient water to fulfill the water rights beneficial uses, it may not be subject to forfeiture. Okay, question over here.
Now, when we sell it, well,
Okay, so the question is, if a water right is not being used, can someone sell it before the adjudication comes through? And I mean, I'm not going to give you advice on buying or selling your water rights. That's yeah, I that's my answer on that. I guess I'm not going to give you advice on whether to buy or sell your water rights. Say that again. Sorry. So if someone sells a water right and then we go out, so sorry, the question is, if someone sells it, does it have value to the new owner if it hasn't been used? And sorry to give you like a textbook answer, but if it hasn't been used for a period of 7 years and we come and evaluate it and find that it's subject to forfeiture, our recommendation will be that it be disallowed.
if he buys it, and puts it to use, it's good.
So if somebody buys it and puts it to use, it may be, I mean, like I said, we want people to use their water, but there are limitations in statute. If people have other forfeiture questions, just for the sake of time with this meeting, I'm more than happy to stay after. Like I said, I'll stay until they kick us out and try to talk through a lot of this stuff. But are there questions about other things? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
What would happen if our area gets annexed by Casey City or Spanish-Fort, whoever? What happens to the water rights we have right now in the town?
Okay, so the question is, what happens if certain property gets annexed? What happens to the water rights? So nothing. I mean, the water rights are independent. Whether you have a water right, it's independent on whether you're in one county or another. Okay. So at this time, I do see one more question in the back, then we'll do a website tour.
So now all of a sudden, we're sprinkle, maybe usable. So saying that still on driving, I might keep that one.
Okay, so the question is, and correct me if this is not, if I'm misunderstanding your question, but the question is if you moved from like flood irrigation to sprinkler irrigation, so you're not using as much as you used to. So that's our recommendation is based on the amount of beneficial use, not necessarily the efficiency of the system. Does that make sense? So if we come out and you used to flood irrigate 10 acres and now you sprinkler irrigate 10 acres, we look at that and we say there's 10 acres of irrigation. That's what our recommendation is going to say. Okay. All right. So for now, I'm going to walk through the website tour, and then, like I said, we'll stick around for questions afterward. Okay, so this, let me refresh this, make sure. Okay, yeah, so this is the homepage of our website, waterrights.utah.gov. I am not logged into the website right now, so everything that you're seeing up here is publicly visible, okay? So the first thing I want to show you, because usually the easiest way for people to find their water rights is looking at a map. So if you just go to our home screen and scroll down a little bit, we have this map search right here. And it'll come here, and you'll have to bear with me. It's really not easy to navigate this without a mouse. So over here on the right side, if you want, you can, there's a bunch of different layers with different information. We'll turn on adjudication books. So 51.7, this is the book we're looking at, and I'm just going to zoom in and just find a random water right. If it's yours, sorry, or you're welcome for showing you. But if you come in, all of these different points on the map are points of diversion. These red ones, you see most of them are red. Those are wells or underground sources. Down here, that could be a spring or a surface source, the blue one. You can come in and click on one of these, and then it pulls up some basic information. If you want more, you can click this, and it pulls up the water rights database view, okay? So this shows the owner, the quantity of water, filing dates, point of diversion, water uses, all that kind of stuff, okay? If you go up to the top, you can click View Map, and it'll just take you back to the map, but only with that one water right highlighted, and it'll show the place of use, okay? So all the documents we have in our office are public record, and we have a massive file room in Salt Lake that has all of these documents on there. Like every document that we have on, that we've ever had for a specific water right, we have on files in our office. We also have them scanned on our database. By the way, do I need to zoom in? Can you guys see this? Okay. It is waterrights.utah.gov. And let me see. Yeah, waterrights.utah.gov. And I was just checking my last slide. I have our contact information. I'll leave it up while we answer questions, and I can put that on there. So if you go to the second tab here, it says Scan Documents. I automatically, just out of habit, sort by date, but we have all these documents for this water right. You know, it started out as an application to appropriate, filed in 1992. They filed proof in 2003. They were issued a certificate in 2004. So any of that documentation you can see on our website. And like I said, this is all public facing, okay? The next thing I want to show you, if you come up here, top left and click our logo, it takes you back to the home screen. You can scroll down to this adjudication right here and click that. Takes you to this video that talks through the adjudication process. And then there's these other links down here. So if you click active adjudications, then Benjamin will be right here. If you want, you can go, it's another way to get to the map. If you click that little map icon, but this time it'll have the books drawn, and it should zoom in and have all the points of diversion turned on. Yeah, like that. We'll close out of that. Another thing you can look at here, if you click the subdivision number, it will show you our progress, and you can check these different boxes to see our progress. You can search for a specific water right and see where it's at in this process. You know, notice to file claim served. We had a claim filed, different things like that. Field review complete. This is an opportunity. You can click here to file a claim not of record. Again, these are those grandfathered pre-statutory water rights. And that takes us to our water user claim wizard. We'll look at that in a second. But yeah, this lists all the rights, all of the rights on the state engineer's record in this subdivision. If we just pick one and just click one randomly, comes in here. The next thing I want to show you is this water user claim wizard. So if you go to the water right print screen is what we call this, you notice this red banner that says this is in an active adjudication area. You can come up here and click file a water user's claim. Okay, like I said, on May 22nd, we will mail all of these out to you. If you are an owner of a water right on our records, we will send you a water user claim with all that information from our database. We'll send it out to you. If you agree with it, if everything looks right, you can just sign it, send it back to us. If you want, you can come in here and you can generate a water user's claim from our website here. Unfortunately, we're not quite to the point where we can have claims filed online. We're working on that, but this will help you generate one. So if this is you, you can check that box and click next. If not, you can enter your name in this saying, I want to claim this water right number right here. You can put your information in. For now, I'm just going to click this. You need a phone number. Just put my office number in there. Click next. And it generates this water user's claim. So you can print this off, sign it, send it to us. If all you need to do is update the owner information. If you want to go through and make any edits to the source, points of diversion, water uses, anything like that, you can continue to click through this next, and it allows you to edit any of these things. Okay? And I just want to say again that this is a helpful tool if you want to create a water user claim, but you need to print it off, sign it, and send it to us. Okay. And I think that's it. Oh, no, there's one more thing I want to show you on our database. So again, if you go to the home page, go down to adjudication, you can come over to adjudication status, and this has a whole bunch of different adjudication subdivisions and divisions and things. You scroll all the way down to Utah Lake Jordan River and go to Benjamin. You can click this. It has the civil number here, the initial court case, the court orders that ordered the adjudication, and then you can follow our progress here throughout each of these. Anytime we send a mailing or anything, we'll put this stuff on this page. The helpful thing at this point for this page, if you go to initial public meeting date and click that, eventually, there we go. These are the slides from the presentation I just gave you. So all that is on our website, accessible to you. And like I said, we're recording this meeting if you want to go back and watch the presentation again. So any questions with the website specifically? Yeah, go ahead. Okay, sorry I said go ahead and didn't point to anybody. So over here first, sorry. Okay, so where does it show how many animals, or I would expand that to say the beneficial uses. If I could find my cursor, there it is. So on the water right database, the water right print screen, if you scroll down, it has this section here for water uses. And that's where it will list whatever beneficial uses there are. Okay, and then there was another question. I heard a voice over here, but okay, great question. And I'm happy to say this as many times as I need to, but the question is, if you filed a proof with the state engineer's office in the past and gotten a certificate of beneficial use and nothing has changed, do you need to file a claim? The answer is yes. If you have a water right, you need to file a claim. Okay, the exception to that is if it's not a perfected water right or if it's a share statement. Feel free to call us. We'll tell you if it's a perfected water right or a share statement and whether you need to file a claim. But yes, you need to file a claim. If you take nothing away from this meeting, just take away that we're going to be sending out notice to file claims on May 22nd. And if you have a water right, you need to file a claim. Okay, I can't emphasize that enough. So at this point, any questions specifically about the website? Yeah, one in the back. Go ahead. So, okay, good question. To clarify, the question is, I said you can go edit information. Does that mean anybody can go edit information? And to clarify, that water user claim wizard, somebody can go in and edit the information and generate a water user's claim that has whatever water right number on the top, but they're not editing the water rights database or anything like that. They can generate a claim and file a claim. So the question is, can somebody file a claim on somebody else's water rights? The answer is yes. But I mean, that's part of our evaluation. We go out and evaluate the beneficial use. If somebody wants to talk about that more, they can come talk to me afterward. At this point, okay, so if somebody files a claim on your water right and you file a claim on your water right, we're going to go out and investigate the attributes of that water right, and we'll recognize that our recommendation will reflect the ownership on our records. So if you have more questions about that, we're gonna wrap this up, wrap up the meeting and the recording. Like I said, I'll hang out as long as I need to answer everybody's questions. Will my staff please stand up and raise your hands? If you have questions, you can come talk to me or any of the folks there, okay? And we'll go ahead and end the recording there. And I'm going to put this information up. Is 1 second.